Welcome back to the channel, guys. We got more history on the go for today, and we're going to World War I, and we're doing Epic History TV. So this is going to be a 9-part series, guys.
9 parts.
That we're starting today. So I believe that parts of this are going to be like 1914, 1915. We're going to go through each year. There might be parts where we do, there's 1915, 1916, then we get to 1917, and there's 2 parts to 1917. I don't know.
Closer to ending the war type thing.
Yeah, so I don't know how it's going to all play out, but that's to give you an idea as to how we're going to approach this. We're going to release each part one by one, and hopefully you stick around with us as we go through the process of World War. So we're starting with 1914 today, which is the beginning of the war. And we were just discussing before we got on camera that Sam is actually much more familiar with World War I than she is with World War II. And for me, it's actually the opposite.
Yeah, well, I think like for me, I was saying that in high school, I learned more about World War I. I feel like in just movies and pop culture and general life, I've learned more about World War II than World War I, because obviously this was longer ago. But I specifically remember in high school being taught about World War I, about like the trenches and the Treaty of Versailles and all of that. So
yeah, I learned some of it through history and documentaries and stuff like that. But I actually probably learned a lot from World War II in playing World War II video games.
Yeah, fair.
Growing up, there was a lot of whether it was a first-person shooter or strategic games, and I remember I played one on the computer, and it was like you were actually, you could pick your side, whether you wanted to be on the Axis or you wanted to be on the Allied, and it was like a virtual world that everybody was engaged in. So, anyways,
yeah,
that's
I
where
definitely was never playing those.
I am not shocked by that, Samantha. You were much more into the World of Warcraft than the World War.
Sims. World of Warcraft and Sims were my jams.
That's right. So anyways, we're going to get into some epic history on this one. Hopefully you guys enjoy it. If you do, remember, hit that like button. You ready to get it started?
I am. Let's do it.
Let's roll.
(1914). The great powers of Europe are divided into 2 rival alliances, the Triple Entente, France, Britain, and Russia, united by fear and suspicion of Germany, Europe's new strongest power. And the Triple Alliance, Germany, which fears encirclement by its rivals, Austro-Hungary, clinging on to a fragile empire, and Italy, seeking gains at French expense. The spark comes on the 28th of June in the city of Sarajevo. Archduke Franz Ferdinand, heir to the Austro-Hungarian throne, is assassinated by a 19-year-old Slav nationalist named Gavrilo Princip. Austro-Hungary accuses its Balkan rival Serbia of having aided the assassin and sends an ultimatum demanding humiliating concessions. Serbia rejects the ultimatum, and Austro-Hungary declares war. Within hours, Austrian forces are shelling Belgrade. The Russian Tsar, Nicholas II, feels honor-bound to defend Serbia, a fellow Slav nation, and orders the Russian army to mobilize. German Emperor Wilhelm II has promised his support to Austro-Hungary. He and his generals see conflict with Russia as inevitable, and the sooner the better, as Russian strength grows year on year. Russian mobilization is used to justify German mobilization, followed by a declaration of war on Russia. Germany knows war with Russia means war with Russia's ally, France. It has developed the Schlieffen Plan to meet this threat of a war on 2 fronts. First, its armies will advance rapidly through neutral Belgium to encircle and destroy French armies near Paris and win a quick victory. Then its forces can move east to deal with Russia, whose huge army will take much longer to mobilize. And so Germany declares war on France. 6 million men are now marching to war across Europe.
What? 6 million?
Yeah.
Immediately.
Wild.
That quickly.
Let's go.
It's crazy how quickly that transpired, all from an assassination.
Yeah.
That's wild.
Archduke Franz Ferdinand.
It's also wild when you think about where we are today in the world and the alliance that was back then between Russia and France, and how, that's clearly not the case any longer.
It's like everybody against Russia now.
Yeah. Really, really wild, though, that we went from 0 assassination, 6 million men.
Yeah, and this is also, I noticed, like, this is pre-Russia going communist, right? Because it was the Caesar, family line that was still in, or was that what they were called? Caesars, or the CSRAR, or whatever. That's what it was, the way that it was structured back then, which I didn't realize.
It was different. It was back on, oligarch ideas, right, back then. Which is, it's crazy how much times have changed in 100 years.
Yeah.
We're just talking 100 years, and the world was so, so different. And I guess that a big part of that is what happened post World War I and post World War II, how that reshaped the entire world, right? Anyways, I just want to pause it because 6 million, I was just like,
wild.
Because the population is different back then. It's much less.
Lower. So
right?
That's a lot of people.
So that's a big percentage of the people, right?
Yeah.
And so Germany declares war on France. 6 million men are now marching to war across Europe. Italy, however, remains neutral. The terms of the Triple Alliance don't bind it to join an offensive war. The United States also declares its neutrality. President Wilson and the American public have no desire to get entangled in Europe's war. Britain is France's ally, but at first it's not clear if it will join the war against Germany. But when German troops invade Belgium, whose neutrality Britain has guaranteed, an ultimatum is sent from London to Berlin, demanding they withdraw. It's ignored, and Britain declares war. A British expeditionary force lands in France, while the German invasion is held up for crucial days by Belgian resistance at the fortress city of Liège. German troops commit several massacres against Belgian civilians. The atrocities are inflated by Allied propaganda and help turn public opinion in neutral countries against Germany. France, unaware of Germany's great encircling attack, launches Plan 17, an offensive into German territory. But in the Battle of the Frontiers, they're driven back with enormous losses on both sides. The British Expeditionary Force clashes with the German army at Mons, but the British are heavily outnumbered and soon join the French in retreat. The Allies make their stand at the River Marne, 40 miles outside Paris. Their desperate counterattack saves the city and drives the Germans back. Both sides suffer 250,000 casualties. The race to the sea begins as both sides try to outflank each other to the north. A series of clashes leads to the First Battle of Ypres, where the Allies desperately cling on and prevent a German breakthrough. There are more heavy losses on both sides. The two armies then dig in along the entire 350-mile front, seeking shelter from deadly machine gun fire and artillery shells. Trench warfare has begun. British warships win the first naval battle of the war at Heligoland Bight, sinking 3 German cruisers. Britain has the most powerful navy in the world, 29 modern battleships to Germany's 19. They now impose a naval blockade on Germany, preventing contraband goods, including food, from reaching it by sea. The aim is to bring Germany's economy to its knees and force it to surrender. But a week later, the British cruiser HMS Pathfinder becomes the first victim in history of a lethal new weapon, the submarine-launched torpedo. German submarines, or U-boats, have a surface range of 9,000 miles and can attack undetected from beneath the waves. They herald a deadly new challenge to Britain's command of the seas.
Wow.
Well, that's pretty wild. That was
That's interesting. I didn't know that. So that was the first
introduction of a submarine.
Yeah, and it's turbo to...
It's what?
The little turbo things.
Torpedoes?
Yeah, that.
The turbo things, guys. Yeah, I mean, that's pretty wild because I think from what I remember, and you guys will be able to elaborate more than I will, I believe Britain had been known as like the strongest Navy force for quite a while.
Yeah, until the U.S.
Right. But leading up to this point, obviously had some dominance. And then the introduction of this capability from the Germans, I imagine, was shocking to Britain and to, reshaping the way the war was going to be fought. So that's pretty mind-blowing. Obviously, the casualties that we saw, just crazy to think 250,000 here, 130,000 there. This is like hundreds of thousands of people we're talking about. It's wild. And then they mentioned the trench warfare, which is something I have heard about before with World War I, that it was, really, a sharp contrast to other wars that had been fought. And so now we're seeing it on that front there, that's where it came to be, right?
Yeah, it's also crazy to think that with the torpedo, not turbo, they didn't know that was existing, right? So there was no way for them to prepare any technology to be able to detect it. So it's like you're literally just blindly in the water and have no idea if something's going to come out and take you out.
Yeah. And I guess we're leading into the technological advancements of some of the militarization, which, you really don't think about today. You think about submarines being around like forever, right? But that's obviously not the case.
Yeah.
But it takes me to present day and thinks in the thoughts of what we're developing in terms of drones and, hypersonic missiles and all this other new technology that's not been used much in militarized conflict, and how, if there was a war like this today, how you would have no idea what to expect.
Well, yeah, and you have no idea what other countries are creating too, right? So,
exactly, yeah. So anyways, this is very educational as well. The content is really cool in this video too.
From beneath the waves, they herald a deadly new challenge to Britain's command of the seas. On the Eastern Front, Russian armies invade East Prussia, but they blunder into disaster at the Battle of Tannenberg, where General von Hindenburg and his Chief of Staff, Erich Ludendorff, mastermind a brilliant German victory, taking 90,000 prisoners and destroying an entire Russian army. The Russians contribute to their own defeat by transmitting uncoded wireless messages. A second massive German victory at Masurian Lakes forces the Russians into retreat. In just 6 weeks, the Russian army suffers nearly 1/3 casualties. Meanwhile, Austro-Hungary's invasion of Serbia suffers a humiliating reverse at the Battle of Tser. Austro-Hungary's offensive against Russia also ends in disaster and retreat, with the loss of more than 300,000 men. The fortress town of Przemysl is cut off and besieged by the Russians. The Germans are forced to come to the rescue, launching a diversionary attack towards Warsaw. It leads to weeks of brutal winter fighting around the Polish city of Łódź, but there is no clear winner. Meanwhile, the Turkish Ottoman Empire has joined the Central Powers, declaring war on its old enemy, Russia. Turkish warships bombard the Russian ports of Odessa and Sevastopol, while in the Caucasus, Russian troops cross the Turkish frontier.
Escalating fast.
Beyond Europe, the war rages on the world's oceans and in far-flung European colonies. German troops cross into British East Africa, modern Kenya, and occupy Taveta, while Allied forces seize the German colony of Togoland, modern Togo. but British forces invading German Cameroon are defeated at Garoua and Nsangakong, while a 3,000-strong force attacking German Southwest Africa, modern Namibia, is captured at Sandfontein. A month later, British landings at Tanga end in chaos and defeat at the hands of a much smaller German force led by Colonel von Lettow-Vorbeck. Cut off from Germany, Lettow-Vorbeck goes on to wage a highly successful guerrilla war against the Allies, tying down huge numbers of troops. In Asia, Japan honors its treaty with Britain and declares war on Germany.
Okay, so we're just getting into Japan coming in now. It's crazy. Like, I'm looking at it at the beginning. Okay, we got this war occurring in Europe, and that's where initially you think it's gonna stay.
Yeah.
And I had no idea that there was ever anything going on in Africa.
Yeah, no, I didn't know either. And it's also crazy to see from this time period 100 years ago how like so many countries that we know today didn't exist then.
Yes, and the borders were much
so
different.
wild.
Even, we just saw Poland,
Yeah.
right? And it's a part of Russia at that point.
Yeah.
Which makes sense because I've heard of the history in Russia and Poland before, but I didn't know, when that was. And it was so recent.
Yeah, and even like Turkey and stuff too, right? Like
Yeah.
the Ottoman Empire and in Africa, like
Yeah.
just like West Africa, which is like now a bunch of their own countries.
Yeah, so it's just crazy that this reverberated so far beyond Europe, and how quickly, it's just blowing my mind how
Yeah.
quickly this escalated.
Yeah.
Like
This
it's
is
still
all
in
within 1 year
1914.
still.
Yeah, and like half the year, I think.
Yeah.
So mind-blowing. We're just talking about Japan now, and it's like just one domino after the next of like, it's kind of mind-blowing to me. Like I would love to know a little bit more how this escalated so quickly. Like
Yeah.
why so many countries just jumped in and were like, okay, I'm getting a part of this.
Well, I think also too, like I could be wrong, but like I think at that time, like this whole allied idea was so strong that it was like, you have my back, I have yours. So it was like people were, I think just the value of like being unified, they were trying to go help, right? But it's like when you think about it logically, like some of these countries are losing 300,000 men in a single battle in one place, right?
Yeah.
So it's like to go and send all of your citizens to have that catastrophic of losses for a battle that's not even have anything to do with your country is like
Yeah.
wild in my opinion.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you in that the allied perspective of traditional, supporting values may have been there. But just in light of where we are today and knowing how often war has occurred in history, it just makes me think that there may be underlying issues like the economic impacts that are at play on top of, maybe the alliance aspect, but there's more to it than just, oh, you're attacking this country, we're going to support them and go to war.
Yeah.
Like there has to be more of an interest there. Why would you, like you said, risk your control and your because when you go to war, then the citizens of that country are probably not going to be in agreement with what you're doing. So you're risking, you're going to lose power from a political standpoint as well.
Well, especially something like Japan, right? Like that's like on the other side of the world than like where all this is all happening. So it's like, I could understand maybe if you're in you're already in the crossfire of that area and you're like, okay, I'm going to get involved in this because like it's hurting us anyway.
Well, yeah, like if you're Russia and you've got, your neighbors that are going to war already, it's like, well, I'm going to get pulled into this eventually.
Exactly.
So I'm going to
but
choose
somebody
my side
like
now.
Japan, I mean, Africa makes a little bit of sense too, right? Because they had colonizations that were like affiliated with those countries. Like they literally said German something. So it's like a part of Africa was German, right? So I think that's why that was getting British and stuff like that.
Yeah, I just kind of look at that though. I'm like, that area is so convoluted already, and the military bases in those areas, I could be wrong, are probably not huge anyway. So it's like, why wouldn't you just worry about conquering your areas of Europe first, and then once you've done that, you can worry about the rest of it?
Yeah, for sure. I think I was just making the point that at least it has an affiliation. Like Japan has like literally nothing to do with it, right?
Yeah.
So,
anyways, not to go on a tangent there, but I was just, sometimes there's more to the story than what you get in the history books, and that's the point.
If you guys know any of the deets, the juicy details, put them in the comments.
A highly successful guerrilla war against the Allies, tying down huge numbers of troops. In Asia, Japan honors its treaty with Britain and declares war on Germany. Japanese forces go on to seize the German naval base at Tsingtao. the German colonies of Samoa and New Guinea surrender to troops from New Zealand and Australia. But in the Pacific, off the coast of Chile, German Admiral von Spee's powerful East Asia squadron sinks 2 British cruisers at the Battle of Coronel.
It's literally
Both
a world
ships
war.
are lost with all hands. 5 weeks later, he runs into a British naval task force at the Falkland Islands. 4 of the 5 German cruisers are sunk. Von Spee goes down with his flagship. Meanwhile, in the Middle East, British troops seize control of the Ottoman port of Basra, securing access to the vital Persian oil that fuels the British fleet. That winter, Austrian troops finally capture Belgrade. But the Serbs then counterattack and drive them back once more. The fighting in Serbia has already cost around 200,000 casualties on each side. In the North Sea, German warships mount a hit-and-run raid against English coastal towns, shelling Hartlepool, Whitby and Scarborough, and killing more than 100 civilians. On the Western Front,
Whitby and Scarborough,
I know. I was like, weird.
where we grew up in Canada, in the vicinity of 30 minutes, you have 2 cities called Whitby
And Scarborough.
and Scarborough.
Scarborough.
So clearly that's where it must have came from, originated from.
Yeah.
And we never knew that.
Yeah, I had no clue.
That's pretty crazy.
Wild. Also, I have a question. I don't know if you know the answer to this. Maybe not. If not, maybe you guys. But why is there so many naval bases for Britain and Germany all over the world? Like, why is there naval bases in, I forget where, like in China and in Australia and in, like all these places that have nothing to do with Germany and Britain? Is that just because of the colonization?
Yeah, I think, well, the big point of that is Britain had, like colonized a lot of areas around the world. So
Yeah.
they had cultural impacts and therefore developed those bases over time. But it's kind of like today, right? Like America has military bases, like, I don't know how many hundreds around the entire world. And that's allowed them to have militarized control. So I think it's a strategic standpoint
True.
that they did it so that, when they colonized these areas through exploration, they made a point to, implement naval bases and, military bases in these areas so that they could control them. Because if you don't have that there, somebody else can just come in and take the land and it's theirs now, right?
Yeah.
It's a lot easier to defend something and deter people from coming into those regions when you've already set up a defense mechanism.
Yeah,
right?
I was just confused because it's like they said that Japan went over and took over the German base in China. And I was like, why is there a German base in China? That
Yeah, and
seems
it's
weird
just
to me.
probably the power of the military and the development and the
Sure.
industrialization that they had at that point allowed them to go to different areas of the world and do those things. And so I don't know the specifics on it. And like you said, maybe people in the comments can elaborate on it. But that's what I would guess was
Yeah.
the idea. Anyways, it was just cool, like I said, to find out about where we grew up.
Yeah.
civilians. On the Western Front, the French launched their first major offensive against the German lines. But the First Battle of Champagne leads to small gains at a cost of 90,000 casualties.
Small.
While in the Caucasus, an Ottoman offensive through the mountains in midwinter ends in disaster at Sarikamish. Turkish casualties total 60,000, many frozen to death. On the Western Front, that first Christmas is marked in some sectors by a short truce and games of football in no man's land, the killing zone between the trenches.
Interesting.
Yeah. So that's Epic History TV. Great job on the video. I like it. The music, the narration
Yeah, I
is
thought
great.
the narrator was really good.
Yeah, the visuals are cool. It kind of gives you a great perspective, more detailed map on
I
how
also
things
liked how
look.
they showed imagery that I think is like actual authentic from that time
Right.
period,
Yeah.
like photos
Pictures,
and stuff.
photographs. Yeah.
which is cool.
Yeah. And they mentioned the truce, the Christmas truce there. We did a song by Sabaton called The Christmas Truce.
Yeah.
I think that's what they were referring to
Yeah.
in that. So
So
that
they
was
came
cool.
together in no man's land.
Yeah, so we're bringing together so much of what we've done on the channel
Yeah,
already.
cool.
And so I really liked part one
Yeah.
of this. It was really informative for
I
me.
definitely want to do part 2.
Yeah, I definitely do as well. So hopefully you guys enjoyed it and you want us to continue down this path. Don't jump ahead. Wait for us. We'll probably be releasing this weekly now to do this 9-part series. So I've really enjoyed getting to know this much more. It's been eye-opening for me. I think you as well.
Me too. There's bits and pieces of that I recognize, like I said, from learning about in school, like certain names and stuff that sounded familiar.
Yeah.
But I definitely don't remember that in its entirety. So, and
Yeah.
there was parts in there I definitely never learned about.
Well, let us know about any of the comments that we made. If you want to enlighten us, we're always like learning on this channel. That's what we've done through our journey. So you can continue to do that. But hopefully you want to join us if this is your first time on the channel by hitting that subscribe button and continuing down this path for our next videos. We drop 2 every single day. So if we don't see you in our next ones tomorrow, we'll definitely see you on our next World War I video. Have a great day, guys.
Thanks for watching. See you then.